Hi, I'm Tom Luna. I'm a former school board member. I was privileged to serve as senior advisor to U.S. Secretary of Education Rod Page. I also had the honor of serving for 8 years as Idaho State Superintendent of Public Instruction. During that time, I also served as president of the Council of Chief State School Officers. One thing I have learned in all these experiences is that educating children is not rocket science, it's more complicated. On my podcast, Swimming Upstream, we will visit with courageous leaders who challenge the prevailing tide and inspire all of us to swim against the current. Let's jump in.
Welcome to another episode of Swimming Upstream. I'm Tom Luna, your host, and we are here at Excel in Ed in Atlanta, a big education conference that we kindly refer to as Jeb Fest, and directly connected with former Governor Jeb Bush. It's a place where education leaders from all across the country converge once a year to trade ideas, learn from each other, and to see kind of what the trends and ideas are that are moving across the country that are having a positive impact on student achievement. And we take this opportunity to actually record our podcast here. And today we have Ellen Weaver, the State Superintendent of South Carolina. And Ellen, thank you for joining us again on Swimming Upstream.
Yeah, so exciting. It was a year ago, wasn't it?
That's right. It was a year ago. It was like 2 weeks after the election, and you had won. So you're one of like a dozen state superintendents in the country that are elected.
That's right.
The rest are appointed by governors or boards. But I remember you sitting there, and you had just won. Your eyes were kind of wide.
I think I was a little bit shell-shocked.
Yeah, still a little bit shell-shocked. But you sat down with us, and you laid out a vision for children and education in South Carolina. And so let's talk about, well, first off, talk to us about the transition, just leading up to your first day in office. And then, the first couple months as you put together a team and immediately jump into the middle of a legislative session.
Yes, well, it's so much. There is absolutely no runway in these jobs, as you know. So upon election, I came to Excel in Ed, and I was so fortunate. My predecessor, Superintendent Spearman, was incredibly gracious during the transition, allowed me access to get into the department, to start talking with office directors, to start talking with some of her deputies, and to really start crafting what a smooth transition could look like. So I was sworn in on January 11th. About a week later, I was in front of the House presenting the department's budget.
Yeah.
So again, there's not a lot of runway, but the staff at the department have been absolutely wonderful to work with. And it has been exciting to build a highly competent, highly motivated team. I have such a strong sense of urgency. These children are never going to get a second shot at their education. And as a great philosopher once said, we have a long way to go and a short time to get there. So.
Yeah, I mean, the comment I've used, I'm sure you feel the same, as the adults in the system take their time, a second grader is going to be a third grader next year. Yes. A third grader is going to be a fourth grader, right? Yes. And these kids aren't going to wait. And so I'm glad there's a sense of urgency and that we don't have a lot of time, right?
Yep.
Because we're talking about our kids' future. Some of the things that you talked about, and you made some real progress this first year in office, was literacy.
Yes.
You still are a huge fan of science of reading. We heard a lot about that at last Education and Excellence in Education. It's still a conversation going on here, but talk about your efforts to actually pivot to a literacy program focused on the science of reading.
Well, we know that reading is absolutely foundational to every academic building block that a student has to have to be successful in life. If you can't read, you can't do anything. I mean, There's no secret that 70 to 80% of our incarcerated populations are functionally illiterate.
But I don't think a lot of people know that, but that's
Yes.
a huge fact, right?
It is a huge factor. And when you think about some of the issues that we're facing in school around discipline, around dropout, if a child is being asked to do work as they progress through school that they have not been given the fundamental tool that they need to do that work, is it any wonder that they are acting out, that they have mental health challenges. And certainly there are many factors that go into that conversation. But literacy really is the foundation of all learning. And so I am so excited by our work in South Carolina. My number one budget request going into the legislative session this year was for professional development for our teachers, to give them the toolkit that they need to effectively diagnose where their students are and to use what we know is the brain science behind how children learn how to read. And sadly, this is something that for the last few decades, our teachers have not been getting in our ed prep programs. And so we're having to reteach teachers how to teach reading. But our General Assembly came to the table in a big way. We got $40 million to train all of our K-3 teachers in the science of reading using the same professional development that they did in Mississippi, the LETTERS program. And I'm actually going through LETTERS myself because I said, I'm not going to ask our teachers to do something that I'm not willing to spend my time doing. And I care so deeply about this literacy journey that I want to be able to go into the classroom and speak to teachers about the techniques that they're employing, about what they're doing in a way that, we can have a real conversation. And it's been wonderful. And, it's one thing for me as the state superintendent to lecture teachers about what they should do or shouldn't do. It's so much more powerful when they actually hear it in the voice of their peers. And so we actually have put up a page on our website, ed.sc.gov/literacy, that is teachers in their own voice talking about how this is equipping them with skills that they never knew that they needed. And it's a really interesting thing because teachers express a sense of joy at what they now know, a sense sometimes of guilt at what they didn't know before and what they wish they did know. And so we're going to make sure that every teacher in South Carolina has that foundational knowledge.
That's incredible, the effort and the focus on the teacher training, right? One of the big frustrations is that teachers are asked to do things with little or no professional development attached to it. And if there is, it's oftentimes not adequate or it's really not relevant to what they're doing.
We call it drive-by professional development.
And then you end up with this flavor of the month type of thing because it doesn't last, right?
That's right.
Incredible leadership on your part to actually take the LETTERS course, right?
Well, thank you.
And to not only the fact that you can then speak at that same level of knowledge, but it definitely pays dividends that they know that you would invest your time and effort. If it's that important to you, that you would do it, then they realize that how important it is, right?
I think leading by example is the greatest form of leadership.
Yeah. So let's talk about leadership because that was a real focus on, and you set the example for your own department in leadership with your taking those courses and stuff. But talk about, you focus on leadership at the department level, and what that means then to be leaders in education if you're serving in the South Carolina Department of Ed.
Yeah, well, I think that the most joyful and heavy burden of leadership comes down to two words, and it's clarity and alignment. You have to have clarity of mission and vision and purpose. You have to know why you're there and where you want to go. And then you have to align the resources, whether that is financial, personnel, time management, to get to where you want to go to accomplish that mission. And so it's a big job. Education, as you know, I like to joke, is kind of like that Johnny Cash song, I built it one piece at a time.
Yeah.
We have all of these programs and policies and budget silos that have built up over decades, and they may not be aligned for impact. And by impact, I mean academic achievement. That is what our education system exists to deliver, is academic achievement, to empower kids to live to their full God-given potential. And so coming in the first year, really doing a deep dive. We're currently doing an external systems review of the agency top to bottom to really give me more insight into the structure and funding and budgets within the agency that will then help us align those resources to accomplish our literacy mission. Obviously, math is a huge thing. We know that our students are struggling with mental health issues, so we're looking to stand up a project called Character and Resilience Education, or CARE. And then also really engage, lead by example again, in terms of our department staff getting out into schools in the local community to support our teachers. Because whether it's being a tutor, a mentor, maybe it's substitute teaching, maybe it is just sitting in the classroom or in the lunchroom so that students and the teacher can get their planning period, right?
Yeah.
It's so important. And I think that our teachers are so tired. You said it earlier. We have asked our teachers to do so much with so little.
Yeah.
And they have to know that we have their back. And what better way to lead by example than for our department staff to be getting out onto the front lines to let our teachers know that we see them, we hear them, we're here for them, and we have their back. So that's one of the things that excites me most. And I know I could just go on and on about leadership. So the last thing I'll say about it is this. I have been so privileged over the last 2 months to get out into a number of Title I schools. And the way that I selected these schools for visits was looking at our recently released report card data.
Yeah.
These are schools that are beating the odds. And so I go into each of these schools and I say, all right, what's your secret sauce for success? Tell me what you're doing that is enabling you to defy expectations. And proving what I've said all along is that poverty is a challenge. It's not an excuse.
Yeah, there you go.
And it's great leadership. You have to have a high caliber principal because they are the one who is building the culture in that school. They have to be an instructional leader. And then it's high quality instructional materials, the professional development that is high quality and aligned to those materials for the teachers. So it's kind of, a threefold, I think, secret sauce, but it starts with the leadership of that principal.
Yeah. Great for you to get out there and show your support for them and to highlight and bring recognition to the great work that they're doing, because oftentimes in Title I schools, in schools that traditionally struggle with academic, they can show tremendous growth, but still be kind of under this cloud because of the number of kids that actually pass an assessment,
Proficiency,
right?
sure.
When you recognize the growth, oh my gosh, that is a real indication of the quality of leadership and the teaching going on in the school when you see growth year after year after year.
It is. And many of these schools are actually hitting proficiency.
Yeah.
That's the amazing thing, is that they are hitting those growth towards proficiency benchmarks, again, proving that it can be done.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of, again, the greatest burdens of leadership is having a sense of belief and expectation that we believe our children can do this work, that we believe our teachers can teach our children to do this work.
Critical. You mentioned the Title I schools. Is that part of your Hope Network then? Or talk to us a little bit about the Hope Network and what you've instituted there and what the hope and expectation is of that work.
Yes. Well, so I talked a little bit about CARE, Character Resilience Education. I love a good acronym. So HOPE is helping our pupils excel.
Okay. Cool.
And HOPE is actually really tightly woven into our DNA as South Carolinians because we have two state mottos. The first is while I breathe, I hope. And the second is prepared in mind and resources. And so as I like to share when I go around speaking to civics groups and to educators, hope propels hard work. Hope is a confident expectation that the future can be better than the present, but hope doesn't just sit around waiting for it to happen. It rolls up its sleeves and gets to work.
Yeah.
And so our Hope Network is what we are calling our turnaround work in South Carolina. So we have a turnaround law that was recently strengthened by the legislature several years ago that actually increases our both ability and mandate to go into chronically underperforming districts and reconstitute them. And so there are two districts that the State Department was already in when I came into office. And so we are working really closely with those districts because even in the work that the department had done there before, a lot of it was really focused a lot more on compliance and not necessarily on achievement.
Yeah.
And so we really are working hard to bring an achievement lens to that district because, again, I believe the students can achieve. They can do the work if we give them the tools to do it and if we come alongside and help build the capacity and the adults who are there. And so this is the Hope Network. I think words matter. I everywhere I go pray that I can speak words of life and hope to the people that I speak with. And these rural communities, mostly rural communities, they've seen hope wither up and die.
Yeah.
The economic opportunity has moved elsewhere. They see their best and brightest go off to school and never come home. And we know that economic vitality starts with a strong education base. And so if we're ever going to rebuild hope in these communities, it starts with rebuilding education. And so that's what the Hope Network is. So there are some districts that are going to have to be part of the Hope Network, which will be built out into really a shared services model, because a lot of these districts, even once we return local control, don't really have the capacity to do what a lot of their larger fellow districts can do. And so this will bring some scale to the work so that they can remain focused on those academic outcomes. But I ultimately hope to be able to invite schools into the Hope Network before they have to become a part of it.
Yeah.
Let's triage.
Yeah, triage or preventative, right?
Yes, exactly.
And the fact that being placed in one of those schools that is in need of improvement, it's your approach. It's not a punitive thing. It's okay. We're we're here to partner with you with more resources.
That's it. We're bringing resources to the table.
More professional development and more expertise, right?
Yes.
To help you, to help the community reach what they aspire to.
Absolutely.
Every community aspires that they have a great school with kids getting the best quality education possible, right? So you're there to help them reach what they aspire to.
Yep,
I love
absolutely.
that. So when you talked a lot about, and I think what we're going to find out is a lot of what you've already discussed is part of these 4 pillars of your in your strategic plan. But so talk about those 4 pillars, and like I said, I suspect we're going to find each of these found in at least one of those.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So we really started a strategic planning process with my senior team about 6 months ago and said, what is our 2030 moonshot vision for education in South Carolina? Because I'm a firm believer that you have to have a SMART goal. And obviously our mantra is every child prepared for college, career, or the military. So we're not going to give up on anybody, but we have to have a measurable time-bound goal to know if we're making progress towards that. And so by 2030, we want to see 75% proficiency in ELA and math in South Carolina. And so
at each grade level?
Yeah, 3rd to 8th grade. Yep.
Perfect.
Yep. And so we are currently sitting at 54% in ELA and 41% in math. So we have some steep hills to climb, but I am confident that by implementing the first pillar, the science of reading, so we are working, as we already talked about, with professional development for teachers. We're currently adopting high-quality instructional materials. We have new standards that are aligned to those materials now. So we're going to see that, I think, continue to grow. We had a 7% gain year over year this year.
Oh, wow.
And so it's really exciting
that's coming
to
out
see.
Of the pandemic,
that's coming out of the pandemic, yes. But we have to see the same growth in math. And so we're in the process of adopting new math standards, and that will start the same kind of process of, where are we going to find the professional development to teach our teachers on the new high-quality instructional materials and standards, right? Because I think a lot of times what happens is that we just throw things at the schools and say, well, good luck with that. And that's just not what we're going to do anymore. So it's literacy, it's math, it's the mental health piece that we talked about, the character and resilience education. We just heard an incredible talk from Dr. Jonathan Haidt about anxiety and depression and how social media and technology has just really exacerbated that in our young people.
And it spans all demographics, all communities, all urban, suburban, rural. I mean, nobody is immune.
Nobody's immune.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's obviously the kind of structural piece that you have to take care of, which is I firmly believe that you should be 16 and over if you're going to have social media. Utah has passed that bill, and I'd love to see that become law in South Carolina. We're looking at some of the technologies that he was talking about, whether it's a pouch or a cell phone locker that can get phones out of schools during the day. So I think we have to take care of that, but we also have to be talking about the civic virtues and values that unite us as Americans, that make our country great, and that we all share and aspire to.
Yeah.
And that's what the CARE program is really all about, character and resilience education. And then the last piece, the last pillar, is community engagement. Everywhere I go, I remind people these are our schools and they're our responsibility. We need folks to come in and, again, to be tutors, to be mentors, to be lunchroom volunteers, to stand there in car line. Whatever it is that is going to meet the need of that individual school, we need your help. And it's not enough just to write your tax check every year and say, well, I did my duty for the public schools.
Yeah.
We need your most valuable resource, which is your time.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Ellen Weaver, Superintendent of Public Instruction for South Carolina.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being our guest again. Congratulations on a great first year in office, or wrapping it up. I guess it's about 10 months.
Yep.
Now you're gearing up for your next legislative session. You've had a little bit more time to prepare for that.
Yes.
But so much appreciate your leadership and your passion for this
Thank
great
you.
work.
It's a joy. This job is the opportunity of a lifetime. It really is.
One last thing we ask every guest, share with us one piece of trivia or information about South Carolina that most people would not know.
Okay, well, so we're sitting here in Georgia. I think I shared with you last time that South Carolina actually produces more peaches than Georgia does, but because
Georgians around here disagree with that,
right?
I don't see that.
Because we're the Palmetto state, we said, well, you can go ahead and be the peach state. We'll let you have it. But I think one of my favorite South Carolina pieces of trivia is that there is a civil rights pioneer, Mary McLeod Bethune, who now has a Capitol Statuary Hall statue in Washington, D.C. But she was really a pioneer of African-American education in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And her quote that is so famous is that the whole world opened to me when I learned how to read. And that's it in a nutshell. We're trying to open the world to students.
I love it. Hey, Ellen, thanks so much for being on Swimming Upstream.
My pleasure.
We'll do it again in a year.
Sounds good.
All right,
I'll be
thank you so
here.
much.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you for listening. And remember, our children may only be 22% of our population, but they represent 100% of our future. If you found this conversation valuable, subscribe to our YouTube channel and find us on your favorite podcast platform. Swimming Upstream is part of the Strategos Podcast Network. To view the entire lineup of our shows, visit our website, strategosgroup.com.